When you think of licensed games from the NES era, chances are you think of, well, disasters. For every awesome game, there were a dozen more that just completely missed the mark. But today, we're celebrating the games that didn't suck, the ones that proudly wore their licenses and still managed to deliver a great experience. So let's dive in and talk about 10 licensed NES games that didn't suck. Starting off our list is Mickey Mouse Capade. This was one of those games I actually owned when I was really young, and it taught me some of my very first lessons in gaming strategy. You could sneak behind enemies or send the invincible Minnie to deal with tough foes, and that kind of thinking ended up sticking with me for years afterward. Sure, it was a simple platformer, but it wasn't trying to be anything beyond that. It also had a few things going for it that felt ahead of its time. Jaws is another one of those games that's deceptively simple, but honestly, that's a big part of why it's still so playable today. I didn't actually own this one, but someone in my family did, and I always looked forward to getting a chance to play it. The loop is incredibly basic. Collect shells, upgrade your ship, and take on the massive shark before it turns you into chum. It's a game you can beat in 15 minutes if you're good, but there's something so satisfying about that quick arcade-like experience. It's like a snack-sized game that can satiate that retro gaming hunger. Here's a game that definitely put me to the test. Bart vs. the Space Mutants is one of those games that was brutal, especially for a kid, but it was so packed with charm and clever ideas that it was worth pushing through the difficulty. You had missions like spray painting purple objects, using X-ray specs to spot disguised aliens. It really leaned into the wacky side of The Simpsons. Without the license, I don't think this would have worked, but because it embraced the show's personality, it ended up being something special. This one absolutely consumed my time as a kid. The Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout was a really accessible platformer, but it still had enough fun bosses and recognizable Looney Tunes characters to keep things interesting. It wasn't groundbreaking by any means, but it nailed that feeling of being part of a big, goofy cartoon world. For younger gamers at the time, like I was, it was pure magic. Man, Little Nemo was such a gem. I was already a huge fan of the animated movie when this game came out, so seeing how much love Capcom put into the adaptation really stood out to me. You had a dreamlike vibe that made the stages feel magical, and the gameplay, feeding candy to animals to borrow their abilities, was such a creative mechanic. It's a game that still holds up today, and honestly, it's a reminder of how great licensed games could be when done right. Willow is one of the most underrated Zelda-likes from the NES era. It did a phenomenal job of respecting the movie while expanding on its world in ways that actually made sense. I think a lot of people missed out on this one just because of how crowded the RPG genre was getting at the time. But if you ever get a chance to sit down with it, it's a surprisingly deep and satisfying adventure. It's the kind of hidden gem that deserves way more love than it gets. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES gets a lot of flack for being hard. And yeah, it was hard. But when you really look at it, it's an incredible love letter to the franchise. When you didn't want to throw your controller across the room, you were able to reflect on how great the music was, and how interesting the enemy designs were. The amount of content they crammed into that cartridge is amazing. You had different environments, classic villains, the party wagon, all of it felt authentic. The only real miss, it was single player only. Still, if Konami ever wanted to remaster this game, I would be first in line. It deserves another shot with some quality of life upgrades, and I'd love to see additional content so that I could take on other enemies the Turtles bashed in some of their later adventures. Goonies II is one of the strangest licensed games on the NES, and I love it for that. It mashed together side-scrolling platforming and first-person exploration in a way that just wasn't being done at the time. And it dropped you into the world without any real idea of knowing where you were going. Sure, it doesn't follow the movie very closely. In fact, it barely acknowledges it at all, or throws a lot of it straight out the window. But there's a quirky charm to the whole experience. And that soundtrack still knuckles its way into my brain even when I only think of it for a few moments. It's the kind of game where, even if it's a little confusing, you can't help but admire the ambition. Sunsoft absolutely crushed it with Batman on the NES. It's a dark, moody, technically impressive game that feels a lot more polished than most licensed titles from that generation. It's crazy to think I missed out on it as a kid, but when I finally played it later, I realized what an achievement it was. While it doesn't follow the movie's plot perfectly, it still captures the essence of Batman. And more importantly, it plays like a dream. Before we get to the top entry in today's list, please consider liking and subscribing. These actions help the channel to grow, and it allows me to keep doing awesome things with it as we move forward. And here we are, Ducktales at number 1. There really wasn't any other option, was there? It's not just a great licensed game on the NES, it's one of the best games on the system, period. This game is everything you could want from a licensed title. It's fun, it's faithful, and it's packed with personality. The pogo cane mechanic was pure genius, and the levels were designed so cleverly that even now, decades later, they feel fresh. And the music? The Moon theme could probably unite humanity if we played it loud enough. DuckTales didn't just do justice to the show. It helped set the gold standard for licensed games in general. And considering how much it's still inspiring modern developers, that legacy is still going strong today. And there you have it. 10 licensed NES games that didn't just survive, they thrived. Let me know what your favorite licensed games were from the NES era, or if you had one that surprised you by being way better than you expected. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Check out our review for Arcade Paradise. It's a very fun, retro-heavy game. If you're into D&D, you can also check out our sister channel, Tellest, where we have plenty of maps on display. And we'll also be refreshing this channel with new retro reviews, so keep an eye out.